Hello, this is an introduction to Maarg. Maarg stands for a map of arguments. We are a social introspection platform built on a framework for making collaborative decisions. Before we describe social introspection, let us review the thought process that goes behind a typical decision. The journey of a decision starts with relevant observations. Observations are ideas that we are fed from various sources like the news, books, friends, parents, and thought leaders. Some observations are based off our own personal experiences. These observations are a part of our memory and they play a critical role in shaping our decisions. Observations, though, are merely data points. We can think of them as information, but we process information with our own logical reasoning skills to create a knowledge base. In other words, we infer knowledge from relevant pieces of information. This knowledge evolves with time based on new observations, and we have heaps of such inferences feeding new inferences over time. When faced with a decision, we define the possible outcome like a yes or no, or a wider set of options. We then identify some factors that would determine which outcome is better for us. Finally, we narrow down a set of inferences and observations that help us evaluate each outcome by how it fares on each decision factor. As a result of this comparative evaluation, we choose an outcome that ranks on the top. We often share this decision with our friends and social circle, and our decisions or our opinions become their observations. Let us see some examples to understand this better. There are decisions that we make every day, like choosing what to eat or deciding which technology to use at work. We also have opinions on legal and social issues. As we can see, the outcomes of a debate are not restricted to just two options. Let us dissect the thought process that goes behind choosing between electric or gas powered vehicles. Before we dive deeper in this decision, I would like to emphasize this is just an example. I'm not promoting any view, and everything I've written about vehicles here, this may be factually incorrect. Now, so as we were discussing before, we get a bunch of observations regarding the question at hand, and we do this from various sources. For example, a political leader, social media, or a news channel, it may be a friend. So, if we look at certain observations, for example, states like California added regulations that ban the sale of new gas engine vehicles by 2035. Another observation we may have is that EV emissions vary enormously based on where the car is driven and what kind of energy is used there. Keeping these observations in mind, we now come up with some inferences. For example, this inference, it will get difficult to sell gas powered vehicles with time. And as you can see, this inference, we reach this inference using two observations, one about California adding regulations, and another one saying that some automakers agree to end gas car sales by 2040. Similarly, we may have other inferences. For example, in some states using non renewable power sources, EVs don't have a big environment impact. Now, we evaluate each outcome based on factors like environmental impact or cost. Now, we are ready to make our final decision, and this is where a very important aspect of decision making comes into picture, and that is our value system. Now, two people can agree with all the observation and inferences, and yet their decisions may be different because they value the importance of each factor differently. For example, one person may value the cost of vehicle more than the impact on environment, while the other person may value environment more than the cost, or they may be valuing both these factors equally. And as I said before, there may be other factors like availability in a developing nation that also drives the decision factor in a different way. Now, since we have reached the decision point, let us review this diagram to understand what is a map of argument. Imagine this argument on a debating platform. Both sides typically list merits of each and often belittling the other side. The available outcomes are also restricted to two sides leaving little room for other ideas. So, debates by design prioritize conflict over collaboration and sometimes elegance over substance. Another thing you may have noticed is the path from the question to the decision. Now, this path is often called a train of thought. Now, as you can see, our decisions are not a result of a linear train of thought, but a more complex web or map of thoughts and arguments shaped as inferences and observations. The inferences being our primary argument, and observations being the data that drive that argument. This is why we named this platform as Maarg. Maarg therefore stands for a map of arguments, and it also means a path in Sanskrit, which is an Indian language. This map not only captures our decision making process, but also reflects how we introspect. As an individual, we do not pick two arguments to fight. Instead, our objective is to find the best outcome from all the options we have and all the constraints or all the decision factors that are presented. This is why we coined the term social introspection. So, let us review some advantages of that. If we compare this map with other debating platforms, where the lawmakers usually present their arguments as a list of pros and cons, we can identify a few gaps. The two debating sides usually pick one outcome and start defending it without even building a consensus over which factors are important in a winning decision. This means the presenters debate on factors that they believe are important, even if they are different or not equally important to each individual in the audience. Debates also constrain the narrative to a small window of what the debaters believe and why they believe that, but not exactly how they came to that conclusion. This means there is no feedback mechanism for corrections. So, we need a platform where we can analyze the complete thought process of our policymakers and not necessarily just the evaluation and the decision. One major advantage of this approach is that we can easily pinpoint the areas of disagreement that can be data, which is the observation, or the logic, which is the inference. And this allows the presenters to improve their arguments and also make better decisions in a feedback loop. The audience also understands the compromises made in a decision and they can better empathize with the concerns of the other side. On a platform that explains how a decision is made, the audience can independently make their own opinions using their own value system as well. And this is what we are trying to do with Marg. So I hope this video explained the principles behind our framework. In the next video, we will discuss how to use the Marg platform. Thank you for joining us.